You know, usually when we look back at a major historical event, there's this underlying expectation of predictability. Like it feels a bit like reverse engineering.
Right.
You look at the historical record, you map out the geography, and the historian just points and says, there it is. This is exactly what happened. And it perfectly obeys every single law of physics we hold dear.
Oh, absolutely. It provides this sense of absolute comfort.
Yeah.
I mean, we are deeply conditioned to prefer things that are binary, right? Things that are visible and neatly categorized within the boundaries of what we understand to be possible.
Cause and effect, point A to point B. It just makes the universe feel manageable.
Exactly.
But then you step into the world of divine revelation, into these profound spiritual and physical realities of the ancient world, and suddenly that historical X-ray machine we rely on is just completely shattered.
Yeah, it doesn't work anymore.
We find ourselves standing before a landscape that fundamentally breaks those comfortable boundaries, demanding a completely different framework of understanding. And before we step into that incredible landscape today, I want to formally welcome you. We are thrilled you have joined us for this deep dive.
We really are.
Because we are about to explore something truly mind-bending today, please take just a second to subscribe, like, and follow. It genuinely fuels our ability to bring you these comprehensive explorations, and you absolutely will not want to miss where we are heading next.
You really won't. The terrain we're traversing today is, it's fundamentally unlike anything else we have analyzed so far. It requires us to suspend our modern, rigid assumptions and look at history through a lens that incorporates the miraculous.
Our mission today is dedicated to unpacking one of the most debated, awe-inspiring, and miraculous events in Islamic history. We are diving deep into the night journey and ascension of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, alongside the experiences of his companions, may Allah please them.
It's such a massive topic.
It is, and to do this, we are utilizing a profoundly detailed source. We're looking at Chapter 13 of Maulana Maki's extensive Urdu audio series, Sirah o-Nabi. This material doesn't just offer a timeline, it provides an incredibly rich, textured look at an event that redefines the very concepts of space, time, and spirituality.
Right, and to genuinely comprehend the magnitude of this event, we really have to start by anchoring ourselves in the reality of the era.
The context.
Exactly. The backdrop here is crucial. We must understand the profound grief, the isolation, and just the sheer societal hardship facing Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions, may Allah please them, in Mecca at this specific juncture in history.
Let's paint that picture for the listener, because we aren't talking about an era of triumph or widespread acceptance, right? This is a period marked by intense, suffocating hostility.
Suffocating is the perfect word for it.
Yeah.
The source material emphasizes that for Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the physical and social landscape of Mecca had essentially become a prison. Yeah, the opposition wasn't just ideological, it was fiercely physical and economic. The persecution against his followers was relentless. You have a situation where Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is carrying the immense crushing weight of this divine message, yet he is facing absolute rejection from his own tribe, his own city.
Right.
And his companions, may Allah please them, are enduring systemic torture and marginalization.
Which means they have zero worldly leverage. I mean, they are a marginalized minority surrounded by a heavily entrenched, powerful elite that literally wants to eradicate them.
Oh, they lack the physical strength, the wealth, or the societal standing to simply fight off this oppression.
Yeah.
Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was experiencing deep anguish, not a fear for his personal safety, but a profound anxiety regarding the survival and success of this divine call.
That is a huge burden to carry.
It is, and the source highlights that it was within this exact crucible of despair, right when the earth itself felt like it was closing in on them, that a massive divine decree was set in motion. This miraculous event was not a random anomaly.
It was timed.
It was a perfectly timed, calculated intervention. Its purpose was twofold. First, to provide ultimate comfort to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and second, to definitively elevate his status across the entire universe.
The psychological shift there is fascinating, The people of Mecca and the neighboring city of Taif are essentially screaming, "You have no place here, you have no power here," making him feel entirely isolated.
Yeah.
And in response, the universe essentially bypasses the local politics and says, your domain is not limited to these hostile, dusty borders.
That is exactly the core theological argument the source presents. It was a cosmic demonstration. It proved that his influence, his spiritual domain, extended infinitely beyond Mecca.
Right.
It was a way of showing that while a few tribal leaders might reject him, The entire cosmos, the heavens themselves, were subservient to the divine decree surrounding Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Well, with that heavy, transformative context in mind, we really need to clarify the actual terminology used to describe this night. Because for anyone who isn't deeply embedded in Islamic theology, the language can get incredibly confusing, incredibly fast.
Oh, absolutely.
What exactly does this miraculous event entail structurally?
Well, language shapes the entirety of our understanding here, so establishing definitions is step one. Before we can even touch the intense scholarly debates surrounding the nature of the event, we absolutely must map out the geography and the specific phases of the journey.
Right.
The source meticulously breaks down the linguistic and historical difference between two critical distinct terms, Isra and Miraj.
Because in common parlance, people tend to just use one word to blanket the entire night, which actually, erases half the miracle.
That happens constantly, so let's separate them. The first term is Isra. Linguistically, Isra specifically refers to a journey undertaken during the night. Historically and theologically, this refers uniquely to the earthly leg of the travel.
Horizontal part.
Yes, exactly. This is the horizontal teleportation, traveling from Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, across the Arabian desert, all the way to Masjid al-Aqsa in the region of Syria, specifically in Jerusalem.
Okay, so the Isra is strictly that surface-level physical movement across the earth from Mecca to Jerusalem.
Yes, and the second term is Miraj. Miraj refers exclusively to the upward vertical ascension. This is the journey initiating from Beit al-Maqdis, Jerusalem, upward into the heavens, transcending the physical universe entirely.
I think an analogy is crucial here for you listening, just to cement how distinct these two phases are. Imagine taking a highly publicized two-leg international journey. You fly from New York to London, and then miraculously you take a rocket ship from London to Mars.
Right, okay.
But for the rest of your life, when people ask about it, you only ever say, I went to Mars. By only naming the final destination, you completely erase that fascinating, physics-defying, earthly layover in London.
That framing captures the issue perfectly. And the source actually points out a very specific cultural phenomenon regarding this erasure. In the Indo-Pak subcontinent, there is a strong colloquial tendency to loop the entire miraculous journey under the single banner of Miraj. I see. Yeah, people simply say, the night of Miraj. But by stripping away the word Isra, they lose the nuance of the two distinct legs of the trip. The earthly journey to Jerusalem holds its own distinct set of proofs, its own historical witnesses, and its own unique significance that just gets lost when you only focus on the ascension.
So keeping our map clear, the horizontal night journey to Jerusalem is the Isra, and the vertical ascension to the heavens is the Miraj.
Exactly.
Now that we have the route mapped out, I want to dive into the minds of the early Muslims. When Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, presented this unbelievable narrative to his companions, may Allah please them, how did they process it? Did they view it as a vivid dream or a literal physical teleportation?
This specific question opens the door to one of the most intellectually rich spaces in classical Islamic history. The source reveals that the fundamental nature of this journey sparked two major, rigorously defended schools of thought among early Muslims and the scholars who followed them.
Okay.
But what I find truly compelling about the source material is that before it unpacks a single piece of evidence from either camp, it takes a profound detour into the methodology of disagreement. It focuses on how these classical scholars argued.
Which is incredibly relevant. It's a lesson in intellectual etiquette, essentially.
A masterclass, really. It's what the Islamic tradition calls adab, the profound respect, manners, and etiquette of engaging with different opinions. The debate was clear. Was the journey of Isra and Miraj purely spiritual, akin to a profound, divinely inspired vision while the body slept? Or was it a literal, physical reality in a waking state, involving flesh, bone, and soul?
Given the theological stakes, I imagine the opinions were incredibly polarized.
They were passionately defended. But the expert in the source heavily emphasizes a crucial point. Having two distinct academic camps, possessing a genuine difference in scholarly interpretation based on textual evidence, is completely normal.
It's healthy.
Right. It is a sign of a healthy, rigorous intellectual tradition. It is decidedly not a reason for hostility, for excommunication, or for declaring the opposing side inherently evil.
That feels like a direct indictment of modern discourse. Today, if someone disagrees with you on a matter of interpretation, they aren't just wrong, they are morally bankrupt and your sworn enemy.
Exactly. The source uses a remarkably vivid, almost tragic historical anecdote to illustrate exactly how far we've fallen into that modern toxicity. It recounts an incident from the British colonial era in the Indian subcontinent. A literal violent brawl broke out inside a local mosque between worshippers
Over a theological disagreement.
over a hyper-specific secondary juristic detail. The fight was over whether the congregation should say the word Amin aloud or silently during the prayer.
Wait, seriously, that is staggering. A physical brawl in a place of worship over the acoustic volume of a single word.
It escalated to the point of severe injuries. It became a criminal matter, and the entire congregation was hauled before a British colonial judge the next morning. The source notes the judge's ruling, which is just drenched in irony.
What do you say?
The judge, who's an outsider to the faith, listened to the textual arguments from both factions. He concluded that within Islamic jurisprudence, there are historically valid proofs for saying Amin aloud, and equally valid historical proofs for saying it silently.
So the secular judge ends up validating both theological stances based on their own texts.
He did. But his final verdict was a punishment for both groups. He essentially told them, while your religious texts clearly allow for both variations of this practice, they definitively do not allow you to weaponize the word Amin into an excuse for physical violence.
Wow.
He penalized them for abandoning the mandatory core principle of communal brotherhood over an allowable secondary difference of juristic opinion.
That exposes such a raw nerve regarding human nature, you know? We have this terrifying tendency to lose sight of the overarching structure of our beliefs, choosing instead to wage tribal warfare over the placement of the furniture.
It's so true. And to provide a sharp, brilliant contrast to that petty tribalism, the source presents an ancient anecdote that is breathtaking in its humility. It centers on Imam Shafi, a towering intellect, and the founder of one of the 4 major Sunni schools of Islamic law.
A man whose legal methodology influenced millions.
An absolute giant of jurisprudence. The source describes a historical moment when Imam Shafi traveled to Baghdad. While there, he visited the mosque where Imam Abu Hanifa was buried. Now, Imam Abu Hanifa is another monumental figure, the founder of an older, distinct school of law.
And these two titans of thought had significantly different methodologies, right? Resulting in different rulings on how daily rituals should be performed.
Very different. For instance, in Imam Shafi's established school of thought, saying the Amin aloud and raising the hands at specific intervals during the prayer, a practice known as Raf al-Yadayn, are strongly recommended, standard practices.
Right.
Conversely, in Imam Abu Hanifa's school, the methodology dictates that the Amin is said silently and the hands are kept still.
So Imam Shafi is leading or participating in the prayer at this mosque in Baghdad, surrounded by his own students who know his rulings inside and out. What happens?
His students watch in absolute shock as Imam Shafi, the great jurist, entirely abandons his own rigorously researched prayer practices. He does not say the Amin aloud. He does not raise his hands. He conducts his entire prayer strictly adhering to the methodology of the deceased Imam Abu Hanifa.
He shelves his own life's work and scholarly conclusions. How did he justify that to his students?
His students immediately demanded an explanation. They thought perhaps he had received new evidence and changed his ruling. But Imam Shafi's response defines the concept of adab. He explained that he didn't change his mind on the evidence, but he altered his practice out of sheer, overwhelming respect for the scholar resting in that grave.
That is beautiful.
It is. He expressed a deep sense of modesty, essentially stating that he felt a profound shame to assert his differing opinion in the physical presence of such a great imam. He possessed the intellectual maturity to recognize that Abu Hanifa's differing rulings were also the result of rigorous, sincere devotion and deep scholarship.
The humility required to do that is astounding. For you listening, just imagine a modern political or intellectual leader standing in the territory of their rival and completely adopting their rival's platform just to show respect for their intellect. It's practically unheard of today. Imam Shafi wasn't threatened by a differing valid perspective. He honored it physically.
And that is the precise intellectual framework the source insists we adopt before we evaluate the debate over the Isra and Miraj. We are not watching a holy war between absolute truth and absolute falsehood. We are observing brilliant, devoted minds rigorously attempting to comprehend a universe-altering miracle.
Well, with that foundation of respect established, let's analyze the actual arguments. Let's start with the first major scholarly camp. What was the foundational argument for the Isra and Miraj being a purely spiritual, non-physical journey?
So this camp is not a fringe group, right? It includes prominent early scholars and very notable companions, may Allah please them. Their core argument posits that the event was a profound, out-of-body, divinely granted spiritual experience, a miraculous vision that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, experienced while his physical body remained asleep in his bed in Mecca.
Now, if they are making a claim that diverges from the literal reading of a physical journey, they must have heavily weighted textual backing.
Their foundation is exclusively textual, beginning with the Quran itself. The source highlights their reliance on a specific verse that utilizes the Arabic word ruya. The verse roughly translates to, "We did not make the vision the ruya which we showed you, but a trial for the people."
Let's drill down into that word, ruya. In classical Arabic, does that strictly mean a dream?
Linguistically, ruya is overwhelmingly, almost exclusively, utilized to describe phenomena witnessed in a dream state or a deep spiritual vision. It is practically never used to describe a waking physical event involving the physical body moving through space. So Camp 1 logically argues that the Quran itself is defining the parameters of the event by calling it a dream.
I can see the linguistic logic, but here is where I struggle, and I imagine many listeners might as well. If it is just a dream, why is it considered the pinnacle of miraculous events? Humans dream of flying or visiting impossible realms every night. That doesn't make us prophets, it just means we have active subconscious minds.
And that is the exact secular assumption that Camp 1 dismantles using the theology of prophethood. The expert in the source clarifies a foundational, non-negotiable principle of Islamic theology. A prophet's dream is fundamentally different from a human dream.
How so?
It is never a mere fantasy. It is never the subconscious mind processing the anxieties of the day. For a prophet, a dream is an avenue of absolute, undeniable divine revelation. It is a reality that is as solid, tangible, and true as the waking world.
So, in this theological framework, experiencing something in a prophetic dream carries the exact same authoritative weight as objective physical reality.
Precisely. To demonstrate this, the source provides two monumental examples from the Quran. The first is Prophet Yusuf Joseph. In the Quranic narrative, Prophet Yusuf experiences a ruya, where he sees the sun, the moon, and 11 stars physically prostrating to him.
A vision that seems purely symbolic on its face.
Yet it wasn't a fantasy. It was an absolute divine prophecy, an unalterable reality that manifested physically decades later when his parents and brothers bowed before him in the royal courts of Egypt. The second example the source uses is even more staggering in its implications. It focuses on Prophet Abraham. He experiences a dream where he is directly commanded by God to sacrifice his own beloved son.
That is the ultimate test. And crucially, Prophet Ibrahim doesn't wake up in a cold sweat and say, "Wow, I had a terrifying nightmare, I need to clear my head." He interprets the dream as a literal binding command from the Creator.
Exactly. The source leans heavily on the fact that Prophet Ibrahim didn't exhibit a single moment of doubt regarding the reality of the dream. He immediately took his son to fulfill the command solely because a prophet's dream is unadulterated truth.
So they use that precedence.
Yeah, the scholars in Camp 1 synthesize this data. Look at the evidence. The Quran utilizes the word ruya. We possess undeniable theological precedent that a prophet's ruya is an absolute divine reality. Therefore, a spiritual out-of-body ascension is just as miraculous, valid, and authoritative as a physical one.
The theological consistency of that argument is incredibly tight. But theology aside, do they have historical on-the-ground corroboration? Did anyone present in Mecca at the time state that it was a dream?
This is where Camp 1 fortifies their argument with historical eyewitness testimony. The source quotes specific, unequivocal statements from highly respected companions, may Allah please them. The most prominent piece of evidence comes from Hazrat Aisha, may Allah please her.
The wife of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Her proximity gives her unparalleled credibility regarding his domestic life.
Unparalleled. The source explicitly cites a narration attributed to Hazrat Aisha, may Allah please her, where she unequivocally states that she never found the physical body of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, missing from his bed during the night of the Miraj.
Wow.
Her testimony essentially serves as a physical alibi. His body never left the mattress. It was his blessed spirit that was elevated.
That feels like a mic drop piece of historical evidence. If his wife says his body was in the bed, it's hard to argue he physically flew to Jerusalem.
It is incredibly compelling. Furthermore, the source incorporates the testimony of Hazrat Muawiyah, may Allah please him, another deeply prominent companion, who historically referred to the event as a true, profound spiritual vision, rather than a physical transport of the body.
So they have a solid case.
Oh, Camp 1 builds a formidable fortress. They have the Quranic vocabulary of ruya, the established theological weight of prophetic dreams, and the direct, explicit quotes from key companions. May Allah please them.
I have to admit, that sounds almost airtight, which forces me to push back on behalf of our audience. If a prophetic dream holds the exact same divine authority as waking reality, if his spiritual experience was undeniably real, why is there a Camp 2 at all? Why does it matter to other scholars whether his physical flesh went along for the ride? Why not just accept the spiritual journey and avoid the debate?
That is the perfect analytical pivot. Because the scholars constructing the second major camp, the scholars who argue fiercely for a physical waking journey, argue that the physical reality fundamentally alters the stakes of the miracle.
Yes.
The source material heavily leans toward this second view. Camp 2 argues that if it were merely spiritual, it wouldn't have functioned as the ultimate test of faith for the surrounding society.
All right, let's dismantle Camp 1's fortress then. How does Camp 2 build the case for a literal flesh and blood journey across the earth and into the heavens?
They fight fire with fire, beginning their argument on the exact same battleground, the linguistic precision of the Quran. While Camp 1 focuses on the word ruya, used elsewhere, Camp 2 zeroes in on the opening foundational verse of the chapter explicitly named Al-Isra.
The chapter dedicated to the event, what is the specific phrasing?
The verse majestically opens, "Glory be to him who took his servant Abd by night from Al-Masjid al-Haram to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa." The entire argument hinges on the profound linguistic depth of the Arabic word abd.
Abdi usually translates to servant or worshiper or slave.
In English translations, yes. But the expert in the source unpacks classical Arabic semantics. Throughout ancient Arabic literature, poetry, and the entirety of the Quranic corpus, the word abd is never, ever utilized to describe a disembodied soul, a ghost, or a wandering spirit.
Oh, interesting.
Abd strictly defines the complete, holistic, living human entity, the indivisible combination of flesh, blood, bone, and soul operating in unison.
So the logic follows, if the divine intent was to communicate a purely spiritual journey, the Arabic language possesses dozens of words for soul or spirit that could have been used. By deliberately selecting abd, the text necessitates the presence of the physical body.
It makes a physical body a textual prerequisite. You simply cannot label a spirit floating in the ether in an abd. Building on that, they deploy their second piece of linguistic evidence from the exact same verse, the phrase laylan, which translates to by night.
Who took his servant by night? It seems like a simple timestamp. Why is that evidence of a physical journey?
The source illuminates the inherent logic. Think about the biological reality of dreams. Dreams, by their overwhelming fundamental nature, occur at night while a person is asleep. If the Quranic verse was simply recounting a profound dream, explicitly specifying that it happened by night would be grammatically and logically redundant.
It would be like me telling you I had a really crazy dream last night while I was sleeping in my bed. You would look at me and say, obviously, that's how dreams work.
Exactly. Such clumsy redundancy is completely antithetical to the recognized linguistic mastery and precision of the Quran. By taking the time to explicitly state that this extraordinary, expansive journey occurred by night, the text is forcefully signaling a break from the expected norm.
Right.
It is declaring this waking, physical, geographical movement, which conventionally takes caravans several months of grueling travel, was miraculously compressed and executed entirely under the cover of a single night.
The linguistic arguments are incredibly sharp, but for me, the most compelling angle you mentioned earlier is the sociological one, the reaction of the people on the ground in Mecca.
The source dedicates significant bandwidth to this sociological proof because it anchors the abstract theology in raw human behavior. Let's return to the hostile, suffocating environment of Mecca we established at the beginning of the deep dive. The Meccan elite were predatory. They were actively hunting for any vulnerability, any excuse to mock, discredit, and dismantle the influence of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
So put us in the scene the morning after the event. If Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, walked into the public square and simply announced, I experienced the most profound spiritual vision last night. I dreamt my soul flew to Jerusalem and ascended to the highest heavens. What is the realistic response from his enemies?
Absolute apathy. There would have been zero societal reaction. As the source logically argues, human beings dream of impossible, fantastical things constantly. A violently hostile enemy isn't going to organize a riot or launch a smear campaign just because you reported a wild dream. They would dismiss it as the ramblings of a sleeping mind.
But the historical record shows they didn't dismiss it. They reacted violently.
The source details an immediate, massive societal uproar. The mockery reached unprecedented levels. The psychological pressure was so intense that some individuals who had only recently embraced the faith actually began to doubt and apostatize. But the crucial detail is how the Meccans attacked him. They didn't just laugh, they demanded rigorous, verifiable physical proof.
They treated it like a cross-examination in a courtroom.
They did, knowing full well that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had never physically traveled to the region of Syria or Jerusalem in his life. They aggressively interrogated him about the specific architectural layout, the doors, and the pillars of Masjid al-Aqsa.
Wow.
And even more damningly in their minds, they interrogated him about their own trade caravans currently navigating the desert from Syria back to Mecca. They challenged him. If your physical body was truly flying over the Arabian desert last night, prove it. Describe our caravans. Where exactly are they?
And this is the turning point. Because if he was merely reporting a spiritual vision, he had an easy out. He could have calmly replied, "You misunderstand. My soul traveled, my eyes were closed to the physical world. I didn't see your literal dusty camels."
But he didn't use that out. He met their physical challenge with physical data. He accurately described the exact locations of their caravans. He described specific incidents that happened to them on the road, what goods they were carrying, and predicted the exact day they would arrive back in Mecca.
And it happened.
And the historical record confirms the caravans arrived exactly as he detailed. The source's conclusion here is formidable. The immense sociological shockwave, the aggressive demands for empirical evidence, and the flawless provision of that physical data only make rational sense if Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was claiming a literal physical teleportation in a waking state.
That is a brilliant synthesis of history and human psychology. But it leaves us staring down the barrel of a massive historical contradiction. And I love that this deep dive forces us to wrestle with this. If the linguistic ab argument and the sociological caravan argument point so overwhelmingly to a physical journey, what do we do with Hazrat Aisha? May Allah please her. What do we do with Hazrat Muawiyah? May Allah please him. Are Camp 2 scholars suggesting these revered companions, may Allah please them, were simply lying or deeply confused when they said it was spiritual?
Not at all. And this is where the genius of classical Islamic historiography shines. The source doesn't disrespect or discard the testimony of Hazrat Aisha, may Allah please her, or Hazrat Muawiyah, may Allah please him.
Yeah.
It fully honors their statements as absolute truth, but it contextualizes them by solving a critical mismatch in the timeline.
Walk us through the timeline. How does chronology solve a theological paradox?
Consider the setting of the primary event. When did the monumental, physics-breaking, universe-shifting event of the initial Isra and Miraj take place? It occurred while Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was residing in Mecca during that darkest period of intense persecution prior to the Great Migration.
The Meccan era. Okay.
Now, plot the witnesses on that timeline. When did Hazrat Aisha, may Allah please her, marry Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and enter his household? The historical record is clear she married him years later, after the migration, when they were established in the city of Medina. She was physically not present in his Meccan household when the primary Isra and Miraj occurred.
Wait, really? That is a massive detail.
It changes everything. And similarly, Hazrat Muawiyah, may Allah please him, did not embrace Islam until many years later. He wasn't even a part of the Muslim community during the Meccan period. He was part of the opposition.
Which raises an immediate question. If neither of them was present in the household or the community during the Meccan event, what exact event are they describing? They wouldn't fabricate a story.
They aren't fabricating anything. They're accurately reporting their lived reality. The source presents a brilliant synthesis to resolve the conflict. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did not experience merely a single ascension in his lifetime. The evidence strongly suggests there were multiple ascensions.
Multiple journeys to the heavens. That recontextualizes the entire narrative.
It does, but with a vital, definitive distinction. The source posits that the initial, groundbreaking, culturally shocking journey from Mecca, the one that triggered the Meccan uproar, the demands for architectural proof and the caravan descriptions, was a uniquely singular physical waking reality involving both body and soul.
Right.
However, later on, during his years in Medina, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, likely experienced subsequent profoundly deep spiritual ascensions, true ruya visions, where his blessed soul traversed the heavenly realms while his physical body remained asleep.
And it is those subsequent maiden spiritual ascensions that Hazrat Aisha, may Allah please her, and Hazrat Muawiyah, may Allah please him, actually witnessed and are truthfully reporting on.
Exactly. Their testimony is flawless regarding the events they witnessed. So when Hazrat Aisha, may Allah please her, states, "I never found his body missing from my bed." She's speaking absolute truth, because during the subsequent ascensions in Medina, his physical body indeed never left the mattress. It was a spiritual elevation.
That is an incredibly elegant resolution for you listening. It demonstrates how rigorous timeline contextualization can dissolve what initially appears to be an impenetrable theological contradiction. It validates the integrity of both scholarly camps by placing their specific pieces of evidence into the correct chronological slots.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the Ada, the intellectual respect we discussed earlier. You don't arrogantly throw away companions' testimony because it complicates your theory. You dig deeper into the historical strata to understand the specific context in which they spoke.
Having firmly established the physical reality of that first miraculous Meccan journey, I want to dramatically expand our lens. Up until now, we've been analyzing theological debates contained within the local geography of the Arabian Peninsula. But a miracle of this magnitude doesn't remain localized. The source narrative takes a fascinating leap forward in time, showing how the aftershocks of this specific night journey violently collided with global geopolitics.
We are shifting the scene entirely. We are moving from the persecuted, dusty streets of Mecca to the absolute pinnacle of global infrastructure and worldly dominance. We are entering the Roman Empire, specifically the opulent royal court of Emperor Heraclius.
At this point in history, the Roman Empire and the Byzantines are locked in massive, world-defining conflicts with the Persians. How does the story of a physical night journey from an obscure Arabian desert reach the Emperor of Rome? And more importantly, how does a Roman mind process it?
Fast forward several years from the Meccan period, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has now established a secure base of operations in Medina. He initiates a bold diplomatic campaign, sending formal letters to the most powerful sovereigns in the known world, inviting them to recognize his prophethood and embrace Islam. One of these critical letters is dispatched to Emperor Heraclius.
Which is an audacious move, sending a letter to the most powerful man on earth demanding he submit to a new faith.
Audacious is an understatement, and the emissary chosen to deliver this letter is a fascinating figure. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, selected a companion named Diha al-Kalbi, may Allah please him. The source provides a striking, almost cinematic detail about him. He was renowned throughout the region for his extraordinary, striking physical beauty.
Oh, wow.
His appearance was so striking, in fact, that the angel Gabriel would frequently appear to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, manifesting the physical form of Diha al-Kalbi, may Allah please him.
So you have this visually arresting, incredibly striking figure striding into the imperial Roman court, carrying a scroll from an unrecognized power in Arabia.
The arrival instantly ignites immense diplomatic friction. The source vividly describes the reaction of the elite Roman courtiers upon opening the letter. The document began with the Islamic invocation Bismillah, in the name of God, and then, crucially, it placed the name of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, before the name of Emperor Heraclius.
To a Roman courtier, where the emperor is practically a demigod, that formatting is an act of war. No one precedes the emperor.
The courtiers were deeply insulted. They demanded the letter be destroyed or the messenger severely punished for his insolence. But Heraclius was a different breed of leader. He was certainly a ruthless politician, but he was also a deeply read scholar of ancient Abrahamic scriptures. He ordered the courtiers to be silent. He insisted on reading the letter and rigorously investigating the claim.
He wasn't dismissing it out of hand because he knew his own scriptures contained prophecies of a coming figure. He needed to verify if this man matched the ancient data.
Precisely. So Heraclius executes a brilliant intelligence-gathering maneuver. He orders his soldiers to scour the local Syrian markets and summon any Meccan traders currently operating within Roman territories. He bypasses the messenger and seeks raw intelligence directly from the claimant's own people. And this leads to an incredibly tense, historic interrogation scene with a man named Abu Sufyan. May Allah please him.
Now, a vital piece of context for you listening, Abu Sufyan, may Allah please him, eventually becomes a respected companion later in life. But at this specific moment in the timeline, he is the fiercely entrenched leader of the Meccan opposition. He is the Prophet's chief political enemy.
He is the ultimate hostile witness. So Heraclius begins a rapid-fire interrogation, and the source details the exchange. Heraclius asks, are his followers primarily the wealthy and powerful elites, or the poor and socially weak? Abu Sufyan, may Allah please him, compelled to answer truthfully in the royal court, admits the poor and weak.
And Heraclius knew what that meant.
Right. Heraclius immediately notes this, stating aloud, that is the historical hallmark of every true prophet. They are initially followed by the oppressed.
Heraclius is actively cross-referencing Abu Sufyan's reluctant answers with his own scriptural knowledge.
Methodically, Heraclius asks, does he ever break his diplomatic treaties or act treacherously? Abu Sufyan, may Allah please him, desperate to find a flaw, has to concede, no, he does not. Every single reluctant answer Abu Sufyan, may Allah please him, provides, despite his burning desire to tear his enemy down, inadvertently validates the prophethood to the emperor.
You can imagine the rising panic in Abu Sufyan, may Allah please him. He's trying to assassinate his rival's character, and instead he's basically handing Heraclius a checklist of divine proof. He must have realized he was losing control of the narrative.
The panic was palpable. The source narrative describes Abu Sufyan, may Allah please him, realizing he needed a wild card. He decides to set a trap. He calculates that the rigidly logical, infrastructure-obsessed Roman mind would violently reject anything that offended their sense of physical reality.
Right, play to their logic.
So he decides to weaponize the craziest-sounding story he possesses to make Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, appear completely unhinged. He brings up the Isra and Miraj.
He plays the teleportation card.
Exactly. He essentially says to Heraclius, you think this man is a divine prophet. Let me tell you what he claims. This man publicly asserts that in the span of a single night, he traveled from our city of Mecca all the way across the desert to Masjid al-Aqsa right here in your territory of Jerusalem, prayed, ascended into the heavens, and was back in his bed in Mecca before the sun rose.
He's baiting them.
Abu Sufyan, may Allah please him, delivers this and waits for the emperor to burst out laughing and dismiss the claimant as a delusional lunatic.
Because to the Romans, who built massive stone roads just to move armies a few miles a day, the concept of overnight inner-city travel, let alone space travel, is deeply offensive to their reality.
It is the antithesis of Roman engineering. But the dismissive laughter Abu Sufyan, may Allah please him, anticipated never comes. Instead, the source describes a bombshell moment that fundamentally alters the atmosphere of the court. The head priest of the Roman court, the absolute highest religious authority in the room, second only to the emperor, suddenly stands up from his seat.
What does he inject into this interrogation?
He addresses Emperor Heraclius directly, and he publicly corroborates the impossible story. The priest reveals that years prior to his current high position, he served as the chief caretaker and head priest of Beit al-Maqdis, Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. And he proceeds to testify before the entire stunned court about one incredibly specific night during his tenure.
What could a Roman priest possibly have witnessed in Jerusalem that confirms an Arabian miracle?
The priest explains the strict protocols of the ancient site. He states that every single night, without fail, it was his sworn duty to physically close and lock the massive, incredibly heavy wooden doors of Masjid al-Aqsa to secure the sacred space and protect the treasures within. But on that one specific night, the very night correlating to the Isra, one of the massive main doors mysteriously refused to close.
Was it simply a rusted hinge or a jammed mechanism?
That was his initial assumption. He pushed against it. When it didn't move, he gathered his staff and multiple grown men threw their weight against the wood, but it absolutely wouldn't budge a single inch. It was as if the door was permanently welded in the open position.
Wow.
Now, as you pointed out earlier, Roman engineering was precise. A jammed door on a massive sacred structure wasn't just an annoyance, it was a structural anomaly that demanded immediate attention. They wouldn't just leave it.
Right, they would assume the foundation was failing, so what did they do?
The priest testifies that it was so concerning, he sent runners to wake up the city's expert carpenters and structural engineers in the middle of the night.
And what did the structural experts conclude?
They arrived, examined the door, the hinges, and the massive stone frame, and they were completely baffled. They concluded that the sheer immense weight of the building's masonry above the doorway had inexplicably shifted downward, pinning the heavy door open with crushing force.
That sounds intense.
They informed the priest that it was structurally impossible to force it closed that night. They would have to assemble a crew in the morning to physically lift the stone frame. Defeated, the priest ordered everyone to sleep, staying near the open door to guard it.
The tension is incredible. What happens when the sun comes up?
The priest wakes up. He walks over to the supposedly permanently pinned door, grabs the iron handle, and with a gentle, effortless pull, the massive door swings shut perfectly. The impossible structural anomaly had completely vanished as if it never existed. But the miracle didn't end there.
There's more.
The priest walked outside the mosque to inspect the perimeter, and near a specific rock structure, he discovered something startling that absolutely had not been there the evening prior.
What physical evidence was left behind?
A new, cleanly bored hole had been driven straight through the solid rock. The priest stands in the royal court and tells Emperor Heraclius, "When I saw that freshly bored hole in the stone, I knew with absolute certainty what had transpired." Our ancient Abrahamic texts explicitly tell us that when a genuine prophet visits a sacred site, he secures his heavenly mount by boring a hole in the rock. I knew on that very night a prophet had arrived and prayed in Masjid al-Aqsa.
That sequence of events is just unbelievable. Consider the sheer irony. Abu Sufyan, may Allah please him, deliberately tries to utilize the most physics-defying, impossible-sounding narrative to completely humiliate and discredit Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in front of the Roman emperor.
Right.
And by doing so, he accidentally triggers the absolute perfect, empirically verified alibi from the opposing empire's highest religious authority. It is a spectacular backfire.
It is the absolute pinnacle of divine irony. The source highlights the profound aftermath of this testimony. Emperor Heraclius was completely intellectually convinced. The scriptural alignment, Abu Sufyan's reluctant testimony, and the priest's physical corroboration left no room for doubt. He recognized that this distant Arabian leader was indeed the prophesied figure named Ahmad, detailed in their ancient texts.
So, given that absolute certainty, does he convert? Does the might of the Roman Empire align with Islam?
No. And this represents the profound recurring tragedy of human history. Heraclius convenes a private council with his top generals, advisors, and priests. He tentatively suggests acknowledging the prophet and aligning the empire with this new reality.
And they don't take it well.
The reaction is instantaneous and violent. The generals are furious, they threaten mutiny. And Heraclius, calculated the geopolitical reality, looks at the anger of his court and realizes that if he publicly declares his faith, he will be violently overthrown. He will lose his imperial crown, his vast wealth, and undoubtedly his life.
So, when forced to choose between the absolute religious truth he just rigorously verified and his temporary political throne, he chooses the throne.
He fundamentally compromises. He prioritizes the safety of his worldly power over the rigorous demands of divine reality.
In that profound historical tragedy, a powerful leader choosing the comfortable illusion of secular power over the uncompromising demands of divine truth leads us seamlessly into the final section of our deep dive. Because the speaker in our source material, Maulana Maki, doesn't just present this as an entertaining historical anecdote. He actively uses this narrative of uncompromising early faith to pivot into a very sharp, very pointed, modern socio-political critique.
He absolutely does. The source material takes a fascinating, aggressive turn here. And for the listener, it's crucial to note our role here. We are not endorsing or condemning his politics. We are analyzing how the speaker constructs his rhetorical argument based on his specific worldview, exploring the mechanics of his critique.
Right. Our job is to unpack his perspective impartially. So what is the core mechanism of his modern argument?
The speaker utilizes the uncompromising nature of early Islam as a mirror. He points to the fact that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, never watered down the miraculous reality of the Isra and Miraj to appease the logical sensibilities of the Meccans or the Romans. The speaker then uses that historical anchor to heavily critique modern Muslims who, in his view, constantly attempt to water down, apologize for, or modify their faith to seek the validation and approval of modern secular systems.
To make that abstract critique concrete, what is a specific example he targets?
His primary, highly vocal target is the contemporary practice occurring in several Muslim-majority countries where Islamic laws believed to be divinely decreed, are submitted to secular parliaments for debate and approval. He frames the entire concept as philosophically absurd and deeply disrespectful.
Oh, so?
His rhetorical question is essentially, how can believers ask secular politicians, who often entirely lack rigorous religious education or moral standing, to vote on whether a law decreed by the creator of the universe is acceptable?
To help you, the listener, visualize his argument, the speaker deploys a really striking, effective analogy. He compares the act of taking divine law to a secular parliament to taking a masterpiece of highly complex, nuanced Urdu poetry and asking a medical doctor to interpret and correct it.
It is entirely a question of jurisdiction and appropriate expertise. The speaker argues that just as the medical doctor, despite being undeniably brilliant in the field of anatomy and medicine, is entirely unqualified to critique the meter and metaphor of classical poetry, the secular politician is fundamentally unqualified to validate, invalidate, or modify divine law. It operates entirely outside their scope of expertise and authority.
So his critique targets the structural search for secular validation. But he pushes the argument further, right? He doesn't just defend the concept of divine law abstractly. He dives directly into the highly controversial debate regarding the actual harshness of strict religious penalties.
He leans directly into the controversy. He addresses the very common, widespread secular criticism that classical Islamic punishments, such as the severing of a hand for theft, are inherently barbaric, outdated, or overly harsh. To counter this prevailing narrative, he references a specific historical anecdote regarding a prominent Islamic scholar who visited Britain.
What rhetorical strategy does the scholar use during this visit to Britain?
While engaging with critics in Britain, the scholars repeatedly challenged regarding the perceived cruelty of these strict punishments. The scholar's response, as detailed admiringly by the source speaker, bypasses emotional arguments entirely and issues a direct challenge based on societal outcomes.
He looked at the results.
Exactly. The scholar asks his secular critics to look objectively at the sheer volume of crime flourishing in supposedly free secular societies. He challenges them to tally up the daily statistics, the robberies, the violent assaults, the pervasive violence against women that occur routinely in major cities like London.
He's moving the debate from abstract morality to empirical data. He's asking for the crime stats.
Exactly. And then he forcefully contrasts that grim data with the immense safety, the near-zero crime rates, and the profound systemic protection of public honor in areas where strict religious laws are enforced without apology or compromise.
Right.
The source speaker specifically references the peace and security observed in Taliban-controlled areas as his contemporary example of this phenomenon. His core argument is that the absolute fear of severe, uncompromising punishment creates an environment where a woman can walk alone at night with complete safety, a level of security he argues is demonstrably impossible in the West.
So his entire rhetorical framework is utilitarian. The perceived severity of the law is entirely justified by the blanket of peace and societal protection it produces. I want to pause and ask you listening to reflect on this dynamic for a moment. Regardless of where you personally fall on the political or ideological spectrum, it is endlessly fascinating to observe how ancient historical narratives like the absolute, uncompromising certainty of the Isra and Miraj are constantly wielded by modern speakers to make sense of and argue against contemporary cultural anxieties and complex legal debates.
That really is.
The speaker is essentially drawing a straight line through history, saying, the early companions, may Allah please them, didn't apologize for the physics-breaking miracle, so we have no business apologizing for the strictness of the law.
It is a resounding call for a return to unapologetic, uncompromising faith. And what's interesting is how he extends this grand socio-political critique all the way down to mundane, everyday actions. He laments the casual, pervasive disrespect of the sacred in modern daily life.
He specifically targets the cultural use of the number 786, correct?
Yes. In many South Asian Muslim cultures, the number 786 is utilized as a numerical abbreviation for the sacred phrase, Bismillahir-Rahman-Ir-Rahim, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Because it's just numbers, people casually print it on everything, wedding invitations, cheap business flyers, everyday disposable papers.
And what is the core of his theological issue with that practice?
His issue is the inevitable physical degradation of those papers. Those business flyers and invitations inevitably end up discarded on the floor, stepped on by muddy shoes, or thrown into the trash.
Right, it's inevitable.
He argues that by attempting to be culturally convenient and modern with the abbreviation 786, people are inadvertently demonstrating profound disrespect to the sacred name of God it is meant to represent. He urges a radical return to the direct, careful, and deeply reverent practices of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions, may Allah please them, where absolutely nothing sacred was ever treated casually or reduced to a disposable convenience.
For the speaker, it's all deeply interconnected. The lack of adab, the lack of profound respect for the physical representation of God's name on a piece of paper, is the exact same underlying lack of adab that allows modern people to arrogantly vote on divine law in a secular parliament. It is a completely holistic, uncompromising worldview.
Precisely. It is a demand for total consistency and reverence, from the grand halls of Parliament down to the scrap of paper in your pocket.
Pulling back from the speaker's modern commentary, it is time to wrap up this incredibly expansive deep dive. We have traveled a massive, exhausting distance today. We started in the sorrow-filled, narrow, suffocating streets of Mecca, viscerally feeling the profound isolation and persecution of the early believers. We meticulously explored the linguistic, theological, and historical nuances separating the earthly Isra and the heavenly Miraj, breaking down the profound, deeply respectful debates of classical intellectual giants like Imam Shafi'i and Imam Abu Hanifa.
We witnessed the brilliance of classical scholarship, seeing how careful historical timeline contextualization solves seemingly impossible theological contradictions, allowing us to fully honor the truthful testimony of companions like Hazrat Aisha, may Allah please her, and Hazrat Muawiyah, may Allah please him, without discarding the physical miracle.
It's just so comprehensive.
It is. We stepped into the opulent, tense royal courts of the Roman Empire, watching an arrogant enemy accidentally provide the ultimate empirical proof of a miracle to Emperor Heraclius. And finally, we explored how those ancient demands for uncompromising faith continue to passionately echo in modern critiques of secularism.
It has been a truly expansive, mind-bending journey. And as we finish our exploration of this source material, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We talked a lot today about how the Meccans, and later Abu Sufyan, may Allah please him, reacted when they first heard about the physical night journey. Their immediate, visceral reaction was rejection, mockery, and demands for proof, because the narrative fundamentally broke the laws of physics as they understood them in the 7th century.
Yeah.
To their minds, a human body simply cannot travel that fast across the Earth, let alone into the sky.
But here is the thought to take with you. Today, we sit at the bleeding edge of modern physics. With our current understanding of quantum mechanics, of the bending of space-time, of relativity where time literally slows down at massive speeds, and the theoretical possibilities of wormholes, is it possible that the scientific limitations of the human mind are exactly what the miraculous is designed to shatter?
That's a profound question.
Perhaps a divine miracle isn't a crude breaking of physics at all. Perhaps it is simply a flawless demonstration of a higher physics, a manipulation of space-time that we, with our limited minds, haven't even begun to comprehend.
That is the ultimate reminder that our human understanding of reality is always, inevitably, just a work in progress. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible deep dive. We hope it sparks something entirely new for you today. And please remember to subscribe, like, and follow the show so you don't miss our next exploration into the unknown. Until next time, keep questioning the boundaries of what you think you know.